Something quite strange was happening in South Australia in February 1964. It began at Gum Creek, a rural locality north of Adelaide near the town of Burra. A farming family had experienced odd activity on their property for some years. Around 1957, the farmer had his attention drawn by his two sons to a large, round, glowing object which was hovering over his old tool shed. They watched it hanging in the sky for a few minutes before the object rose and departed swiftly, disappearing into the distance. The farmer reported the matter to the Bureau of Meteorology, who told him that it was a plane flying from Broken Hill which had gone off course. The explanation made no sense for what the family reported, but the incident was soon forgotten. Memory of the sighting was revived either in December 1963 or the 3rd of February 1964. Dates have become confused over the years in accounts of the case. It seems December was the more likely date. The farmer's wife was laying in bed but awake at about 2 a.m. when a bright glow outside caught her attention, and she suddenly noticed a figure appear outside the bedroom window, as if a movie had been projected onto a screen. The light was so intense that it was like daylight, and she suspected it was coming from an unseen object hovering over the house. The figure looked like a human male, 162 centimetres tall, and was wearing a brown-coloured helmet of some kind, blue-green gauntlets, a brown cape, and knee-high boots. He was carrying a long rod which he moved around the ground and then towards some trees as if scanning them. As the figure walked toward the window, she wanted to speak to the visitor, but found herself unable to, and slid back down into bed and fell asleep. On the 19th of February 1964, the figure returned. This time the woman saw the glow, and the man was holding a black box-like device, which she thought may have been a type of camera. There are two versions of what happened. One says the man was in a UFO which approached and hovered outside the house, and that he was standing at a railing which had a wooden appearance, while another suggests he was outside, as before. The bedroom was lit up by a ray that came from the box, and the projection of a man with a pleasant face and long hair, surrounded by a halo of light, formed on the wall. On both occasions the sighting of the being was accompanied by a nasty odour similar to burnt plastic. Following this second strange event, the concerned woman reached out to a UFO group for help in understanding what was happening. In the days which followed, the woman saw other objects in the sky, but she apparently did not report any other contacts with strange men in future. On the evening of the 20th of February, south of Adelaide in the Coorong, a grazier was driving along Prince's Highway near Tilly Swamp on his way north. At 6:17 p.m. he heard a noise which sounded like the high-pitched whine of an electrical generator, and looked out to the right-hand side of the road. A giant shadow was following his car. "I don't know what it was," he said. "I've laughed at stories about flying saucers, but I was scared to death." Pacing him was a silvery-coloured craft which he estimated to be 200 feet across. He only saw it for a few seconds before it flew away. He stopped at Salt Creek Post Office and phoned the advertiser, still shaking from his close encounter. The next morning, on the 21st of February, at Para Hills, a suburb on the outer northern fringe of the city at that time, a police car manned by Constables Payne and Macmillan was on patrol, when at 5:15 a.m. they saw something out of the ordinary. A bright globular object was moving rapidly from the west in a zigzagging fashion. As the men watched, the object slowed down, but then accelerated away towards the north at a fantastic speed. An hour and a half later, at 6:45 a.m, 4 men were at work at the Mile End Railway Yards on the western edge of Adelaide, when they too saw something remarkable above them. 2 bright discs with dark rings around the edge were manoeuvring in the sky. That evening, when darkness fell, the sightings continued. The first was reported at 8 p.m, when a youth from Croydon, an inner suburb, phoned the Advertiser newspaper and claimed that he had seen a reddish-brown football-shaped thing in the sky. Soon after 8, a schoolteacher from Paynham, a few miles away, saw a dull glowing object which hovered before moving away toward the Adelaide hills. In the foothills at Blackwood, 2 men also reported seeing it. The Advertiser published an article relating the sightings in their 22nd of February issue. The writer had contacted the meteorological station at the Adelaide airport for possible earthly explanations to the events. They had released a weather balloon between 8 and 8:30 p.m. The white cylindrical balloon was 7 feet by 5 feet, which was carried to the foothills by south to southwesterly winds. While this balloon may have been what the witnesses in the evening saw, no explanations were forthcoming for the other sightings. On the 28th of February, a Mrs. V. Smith reported witnessing a flat disc, yellow in colour, which she saw swaying in the sky for 15 minutes. Another strange event is claimed to have taken place at North Plympton, a western suburb of Adelaide, on the 29th of February. Doubt has been cast on the veracity of the case by UFO investigators, but considering the weirdness which was occurring at the same time, just possibly it may be true. On some level. The witnesses were 2 young boys, both Boy Scouts, one named David, who was about 7, and Kim, who was about 10. As in the Gum Creek case, there is disagreement between accounts, even on their ages. The boys lived a few houses away from each other in Dudley Avenue, North Plympton. Not far from their homes is Weagle Oval. Between the two was a disused railway corridor. David was coming out of his house and heard a buzzing noise. One account says he then saw a landed craft in a paddock opposite his house and ran to get his friend, who came back, and they observed the craft for a few minutes. Another retelling says that by the time the boys returned, the craft was already leaving. Yet a third narrative is that the boys were already together and playing when they saw the object descend from the sky onto Weagle Oval. Panorama, the Australian flying saucer record, in 1964 tells the story thus. The boys were playing at Weagle Oval between 2 and 2:30 in the afternoon when they saw the UFO land. A man dressed in a cape, coveralls with buttons, mittens, and high-heeled boots similar to the Gum Creek entity, got out and walked around for about 3 minutes. Neither the scared boys nor the man approached each other. Then he re-entered the craft, which shot off in a flash. The boys did not mention the sighting to their parents until Monday, 2 days later. Police were notified and investigators questioned the boys, coming away with the belief that they were telling the truth about what they said they saw. Australian Flying Saucer Review in 1965 says David heard a buzzing noise and saw a metallic craft with a glass dome and a light on top of the dome, sitting in a paddock opposite his home. A sliding door went up and a very tall figure emerged. A fuller description of the being is given. His face was coppery red in hue, and he had a large nose. He wore a tight black suit with a black cloak and a thick black belt with a buckle. His gloves were black and had some type of writing on them, and with silver chains at the wrist. His headgear was pointed, and his shiny black boots seemed to be made of metal. A similarly dressed figure was observed sitting in the saucer, looking through the glass dome. David crept away and alerted his friend, but when the boys returned they were spotted by the man, who seemed alarmed and ran back inside the craft, which took off vertically and disappeared into the sky. Both boys noticed a soft buzzing noise from the object, which may have been causing a dog nearby to bark frantically during the sighting. The boys went and told David's mother, who advised them not to talk about it as it might frighten some younger children present. Intcat.blogspot provides some variations apparently based on investigations carried out retrospectively in 1981 and 1997. Now the figure's pants are black, but his shirt is of a purple colour and wearing a skull cap. The man is said to be 2.1 to 2.4 metres tall, or between 6'10" and 7'10". A description of the craft is given. It was about 7.5 metres diameter, 4.5 to 6 metres high, and oval-shaped with a dome. The dome was of a silvery grey colour, topped by a spinning ball. Again in this account, the object was already resting on the ground opposite David's home, and it was a noise which alerted him to its presence. David went and fetched Kim, but when they returned, the object was already taking off towards the north. This sighting took place on a Saturday afternoon in late summer in a built-up area, but no other reports were received of an object. Investigators questioned neighbours, including one man who was in his garden during the time, and everyone said they saw nothing. Although it seems doubtful, the object was allegedly only landed for about 3 minutes, and when it left, disappeared in the blink of an eye. In other cases, it appears that only selected individuals can see something, as if the object is blocked from others' minds, or projected into the minds of the chosen. If it was tangible and seen in the sky, it would not necessarily be reported, of course. The Advertiser, as mentioned, published its story about sightings on the 22nd of February, and a TV interviewer with an investigator about the Gum Creek incident, where a drawing of the entity was shown, was screened on Friday, the 28th of February. If either of the boys had seen these, they could have been influenced. Yet police believe the boys were sincere in their report. On the 2nd of March 1964 at Grasmere, a suburb adjacent to North Plympton, which has since been renamed Coralta Park, a witness named Chapman said they saw a long silvery object hovering for 2 minutes. And on the 4th of March, 3 schoolboys at North Plympton said they saw a silvery disc hovering in the air for 4 minutes. The mini-flap ended on the 8th of March 1964, with a report received from southeast of Adelaide. At 1:20 a.m, a man noticed a white star-like object in the sky, perhaps 40 miles away, at the back of the Adelaide Hills. There was no wind and the sky was cloudless and bespangled. The moon was some distance to the left of the object. The object seemed to be self-luminous and revolving as it hovered, as its shape changed. Then it rose a little and moved to the southeast, manoeuvring in circles as it progressed. As it turned, it changed from white to red, and then orange, and then red. It emitted a red shaft of light and a white shaft of light which went downwards. After the man had watched it for 20 minutes, it became red and moved off to the south at an incredible speed. His wife slept through the sighting and was annoyed when learning she missed the spectacle. While the strangeness left Adelaide, the following month an explosion of interest in UFOs would be renewed by the Zamora case in Socorro, New Mexico, which would continue in the US and Europe for the rest of the year.